Let's begin with our top focus this hour, coming in from South Korea, which was being hailed as one of the model nations to have efficiently fought the coronavirus pandemic with immediate lockdown, high testing rate and even tracking. South Korea not just contained the virus but conducted its general elections with record turnout as well. But after close to a month, Seoul reported its highest number of new COVID-19 cases due to the reopening of bars and clubs in the capital. Here's a report. Now, the nightlife district at the multicultural neighborhood of Itaewon in Seoul is now a major COVID-19 cluster, and just 24 hours after its identification, a total of 94 new cases are being linked to the COVID-19 cluster found in the nightlife district. One of the first cases from the cluster was a 29-year-old man who visited a total of 5 clubs and 1 bar on May 2nd. After having developed symptoms, the person was admitted to the hospital on May 6th. Local city authorities have urged everyone who visited the club to get tested for the virus voluntarily. Now, South Korea, which was slowly recovering from the lockdown measures, is seeing a sudden surge in COVID-19 cases. As an immediate response, authorities have ordered the closure of all bars, clubs, restaurants and even pubs around Seoul, and health officials are also struggling to trace all the people who went to clubs and bars in the past 2 weeks.
I was there on the night of May 2nd, around 2 in the morning. I was passing by, there was too many crowd here, and around 70% of them wasn't wearing mask, everyone outside. So I live nearby, so I was passing by, and I took this video on the day of May 2nd. I'm going for the COVID test tonight.
In an attempt to reduce the virus spread, investigators and healthcare workers are combing digital data to trace new coronavirus patients using mobile phone data and other networking tracing applications. The authorities are mapping nightclub visitors.
최근 평일 기준 하루에 5천에서 6천여 건 수준으로 진행되던 진단검사가 어제 하루 1만 2천 건 이상으로 증가하였고, 현재까지 이태원 클럽 등 유흥시설 방문자와 관련해 7천여 건이 넘는 검사가 진행되었습니다.
The surge in COVID-19 cases comes as most of European countries are planning exit plans for their lockdowns. A total of 35 new cases were reported in the last 24 hours, and health experts have warned about the possible second wave of infections. South Korea, which initially gained success amid the pandemic, was being seen as a model to fight the virus. For the past 2 weeks, it saw only single-digit increase in new COVID-19 cases, but the total number of infections is well past the 10,000 mark. Just to get in a sense of perspective, we are now joined live by Dr. Robert Edwin Kelly, who's an American political analyst on inter-Korean affairs and professor from the Department of Political Science in Busan National University. A very warm welcome to you, Dr. Kelly. Thank you so much for sparing your precious time. Let me begin by asking you, now that South Korea is staring at a resurgence of COVID-19 cases, what actions are government authorities taking to ensure a containment, and is ample contact tracing the need of the hour?
Yeah, it is actually, and that's going to take a while, right? Because as your report pointed out there, this gentleman visited, I think 4 or 5 clubs, and he went to a bar too, and then, all sorts of people become infected. You've got 95 new infections, and those people have met people as well, so they have to be process traced. I mean, this is why the process tracing or the contact tracing is so difficult, right? Because it spirals really quickly, it expands geometrically. And so the South Korean government, as your report said, particularly in Seoul, has begun to lock down all the bars and restaurants. Where I live, that hasn't happened yet. Schools have been closed again for another week, which means we all have our kids at home for another week, which is going to be really difficult. You're getting sort of a re-clamp down, right? And I think this is what it's going to be like in a lot of countries, right? Countries are going to try to open up a little bit, and then if it flares back up, you get sort of the re-tightening. I'm just not sure if there's any other alternative. The South Koreans tried, and they got burned.
Right. That actually brings me to my next question, Doctor. Facilities such as museums and churches have reopened. Some professional sports, including baseball and soccer, have started new seasons. And since the new cases have been linked to this nightclub cluster in South Korea, should recreational public spaces be made to shut down?
Yeah, Probably not yet. I have the feeling that the South Koreans probably don't want to go that far yet because the nightclub is sort of a unique experience, right? Which is to say that, nightclubs are really packed and really jammed. Yeah, I mean, like you're talking about that one flight where everybody's sitting next to each other. A nightclub is like a train or a plane where you have a lot of people in a very tight space breathing the air without a lot of circulation, right? That's not the case in a lot of other places like restaurants and museums and churches and things like that. So I think it's possible you might be able to keep some things open where it's less dense. But if it starts to show up again in restaurants and things like that too, then the clampdown will become much more severe. But the nightclub is a bit of an outlier because it's so dense.
Mm-hmm. Doctor, South Korea's new coronavirus cases show the perils of reopening. For a country hailed as a global model, should other countries take a cue from South Korea in terms of avoiding a second wave as they prepare to ease restrictions? And is a prolonged shutdown the only plausible solution at the moment?
Yeah, well, I certainly agree with the first part of that statement, and that's the argument I've been making on Twitter for the last 3 or 4 days in response to this, right? I mean, the South Koreans are widely considered to have had sort of a world-class response to this. The suppression has been really, really good, and they still got it when they released a little bit. They took their foot off, and this thing flared back up. I mean, 100 cases in a weekend, right? I don't think anybody here expected that. It's really all over the news here. It's the big talk, right? Everybody's surprised at how quickly it came back. And so if you think about a country like the United States where social distancing has barely been enforced, where you've got a third of the country that's really pushing hard and protesting against it, Trump wants to reopen this week, next week. I mean, I think in the United States, I can't speak so well to India, but I think in the United States there's going to be a huge explosion of corona cases in about 3 or 4 weeks. So, I mean, if the South Korea is sort of the canary in the coal mine, then yeah, it suggests that the clampdown probably has to last at least another month or two.
Now, let's look at the economy, Doctor. Asia stocks have fallen on fears over new round of coronavirus infections.
Right.
Is the fear of resurgence further going to dent the Asian economy, inadvertently having a global impact?
Yeah, I think it is, in part because of what you all reported right there at the start, which is that air travel particularly is going to be really, really difficult, right? I mean, Asia is very export-dependent, right? India is an export-dependent economy, or export-driven economy. China, South Korea, Vietnam, all these countries export heavily. And it's just really, really hard to do that. I mean, you can't get on a plane. I mean, in South Korea, they've begun to constrict the mail. I couldn't mail a Mother's Day card to my mom because of sort of like restrictions on flights out of South Korea. I mean, if that's the level of clampdown that you're going to have, right, where even regular postal mail is constricted, then, I mean, inevitably that's going to mean major export contractions for all these Asian exporters and then GDP contraction. So, yes.
Right. So let's just leave it at that and perhaps hope that South Korea manages to contain the virus yet again, because let's not forget they've managed it pretty well in the first, in their beginning efforts, and let's hope that they actually manage to repeat those kinds of efforts. On that note, thank you so much, Dr. Kelly, for joining us here on this newscast.
Thanks for having me.